It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me. Craig, shut up. Hey, I need you guys to do these things.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump. So it's...
Welcome to another Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, author KK Robbins joins me to talk about her new book, Life Lessons of a Liar. Now, lying is something we're all familiar with. We've lied to other people, and people have lied to us, and then we lie to ourselves a lot. Today, KK is going to talk more about the lying to ourselves aspect of this. I think we get caught in this trap of telling our things that are not true, and just to make us either feel better or to avoid disappointment. And what that does is it ends up causing us stress, because if you're lying to yourself, your own natural BS meter, your crap dar, goes off in your head. And when you're lying to yourself and you know it, it causes more stress because you're not even believing your own BS sometimes. You're going along with it and you're getting yourselves in trouble. You're doing things that you don't believe in, that you don't think you should be doing. And that's why you generate these lies, and they end up causing more stress. And I think if you can be a little more honest about yourself, well, you'll be able to get rid of some of that stress, and you can start living and breathing a little easier. And that's all we're trying to do in this world, isn't it? Just try to live and breathe a little easier. I'm not saying it's going to cure all your ills, but at least you can be a little less stressed, especially if you're causing it. But before we get to KK, let me remind you that if you do listen to the show and you like the show on a regular basis, please stop by iTunes and leave us a review. It would be so helpful if you left us a review. Not just the 5 stars, which we'd love. Go ahead and do that. But if you can write a little, hey, we think this is great, and explain why real quick, 2 seconds out of your day, I would really appreciate it. You can also go there to subscribe to the show, and then you'll get new episodes every Tuesday. And so every Tuesday the show will come out. You can refresh your iTunes, and boom, we're right there. You're in the iPod. You take it to work. You can hear us while you're working, while you're driving, and you can do all kinds of stuff. But that's how you can, the best way to get us is through iTunes, and it helps us as far as our ranking goes. Also, you can get us at realitycheckpodcast.com, where you can sign up for the newsletter. And the newsletter comes out once a month. It tells you what you've missed, who's coming up in future episodes. And also, if you have any questions, comments, or guest suggestions, and the last one is most important, if you have anybody you really want to hear from, please let me know. Email me, Craig@speakercraigprice.com. And also, you can follow the podcast on Twitter. We are at realitycheckpod, because apparently Reality Check Podcast, too long. Reality Check Pod on Twitter. You go there, we've got a list set up where you can follow all the other guests that have been on the show previously, and you can see what they're up to. So not only do you get to hear them on the show, but you get to see what they're up to, see the great content that they're giving out, and right there on your Twitter feed. So are you ready for the truth? Of course, I could do the cliche, you can't handle the truth, but you know what? Maybe you can. We'll see. Maybe you can handle the truth. Maybe you are the one person who can handle the truth. And you can stop lying to yourself. And we can start by listening to this week's guest, KK Robbins. First off, I have to ask, since it's about lying, how can I believe anything you say today?
Okay, well, that is a very good question, and I will tell you that mainly the book is more about how we lie to ourselves more than how we lie to other people. Obviously, that people have different degrees of how good they are at lying to other people, and I think that we all do it, whether we want to admit it or not. And of course, sometimes we have to lie. Sometimes it's the polite thing to do, or what have you. But for the most part, the book is about looking inward before looking outward, which is opposite of the way that we normally are.
Well, sure.
And so,
if you are consistently lying to yourself about certain things when you talk to people, won't that be just an extension of the lie?
It could be. It could be. For myself, I definitely, I will admit it, was very good at lying, and still am if I were to choose to do it. And really, I don't feel like I have to get people to believe that I'm not lying to them. I think that it becomes pretty clear. I have chosen after years of lying to myself and trying to and maybe lying to other people, really just to protect myself, not like to say to protect myself like, oh, poor me, more just to protect myself from, looking like I was less than I really am, or what have you. And so
being
kind of
taken advantage of, or
no. I mean, actually, it's a negative to me. It's about pretending to be something that I wasn't, which is generally what people, lie about.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's the biggest problem in America we've got now, is that there are millions of people who don't understand that they are not rich.
Absolutely.
And so they lie to themselves that they can live like they are one of the 1% when they're actually one of the 99%. And so they, max themselves out in credit and get themselves in debt because they're lying about the situation they're in.
Absolutely. One of the chapters in my book is that need is a want.
Yeah.
And to express to people that, one of the biggest lies that we tell ourselves is, and mainly lies, when we lie to ourselves, it's just a justification. That's really what it is. And we're justifying behavior. And so a need being really a want is, people will love to say, when they buy a house, it's like, well, I need shelter. But you don't need a bigger house than the one that you have. That doesn't fall under the shelter.
Yeah,
and
you don't need an eight-car garage and
no.
Yeah.
And you don't have to eat out every night because you need to be fed. Like that kind. And I'm someone that, trust me, loves to eat out, love all of those kind of things. But when I work with people individually, I try and explain to them that it's okay that you like certain things, but there's really nothing. I always say there's no want that is worth a hardship. So if it places a hardship on you, then ultimately, there's not a want out there that's going to be worth it.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to, I guess, realize.
And I've met salespeople and speakers who deal in success, quote unquote, success speakers, that, they will spend $120,000 on a BMW or Mercedes or some kind of a very expensive limited edition custom car, when a $50,000-$60,000, which would be a half to sometimes a third the price, would convey the same message.
Of course.
So,
and then that gets into, what message are you trying to convey? Because are you buying the car for yourself, or are you buying it to impress others? That definitely is something that we lie to ourselves about. So
what's the biggest lie that we tell ourselves? What's the one thing that almost, it doesn't matter what situation you're in, it's the most common, this is what we lie to ourselves about?
Okay, that is actually very clear. I talk about it a lot of different topics, but this one is very, very clear and at the top. And that is that we convince ourselves that our sins are less than someone else's sins. And I'm not meaning to be religious or anything like that. It's just the easiest way to, explain it, in that what you're doing is worse than what I'm doing.
Newt Gingrich saying, yes, I cheated on my wife, and then while she was dying of cancer or sick, and then I left, is not as bad as Bill Clinton, having sexual relations with an intern in the White House.
Right. I think that that could definitely be it. I think that people just want to justify, we find people do this in all areas of their life. They don't want to see what they're doing as being wrong or bad, or, that they're a bad person. And that's kind of what we all want to have. I have a saying that I say, which is, we want to be worthy without the work. So we want to be seen as, this kind person, or this generous person, or, helpful or smart or whatever. But you have to actually do the work to get that. You know what I mean? You can't say you're generous without being a generous person, without doing things for other people unconditionally. And I think that people, that is their biggest obstacle, is at least recognizing and admitting that, when they do these things that are wrong, that they're not, they judge themselves differently than they judge other people, is kind of the bottom line.
And they put themselves in a different category. Well, that's not as bad because, and then they do the rationale. Yeah, I agree with a lot of people do that. And how can we start to recognize that in ourselves if we start to do that? I mean, if we're all lying to each other, and we're all lying to ourselves to some degree, Of course. A lot of people think they're smarter than they are, or they think they're not as smart as they actually are. And sometimes it's huge discrepancy. Sometimes it's very little discrepancy, but we're lying to ourselves. How can we, start to recognize the fact, hey, wait a second, this is not true. What I'm saying to myself isn't exactly the case. So, and that could be that's usually the hardest part. So, is there something we can do to be a little more reflective?
I think absolutely. And this is where the snowball effect will come in, Craig. When you decide that you are going to be completely honest with yourself about the choices that you're making and decisions that you're making and mistakes that you're making, and you really and truly, every single time something comes up, every single, misfortune comes up, you actually own up to it. And admit, at least just to yourself, the role that you played in it. The moment that you do that, you now have shifted the power from being on someone else to being on yourself. And that's the irony of this whole thing, is that most people don't realize they tell these lies to themselves because it makes them, feel like they're in control or powerful. And in essence, they've completely given away all their power. Because the moment that you blame someone else, then you no longer have control over the situation. It's that person. And so, it's them having to make the change to then affect you. So if you turn around and you say, you know what, I'm gonna own up to every single thing that I do, then it really does start a chain of reaction in your life. And you start, it's a gut reaction. You start feeling it, and it's just becomes instinctive to to take on that responsibility.
It's basically stop putting yourself in a victim role.
Absolutely.
Victims, they like to make it like we had no control over this. This was not my fault, and sometimes that may be true. Maybe you're sitting in a red light, minding your own business, and you get into an accident because someone hit you. Yes, you are a victim, but not every single thing that happens in your life makes you a victim. And I think our culture has started to kind of be that everyone blames their parents for every problem they have, and because psychiatrists go, oh, what does it go back to? It goes back to when you were 9 years old and your parents took away your 8-track cassette player, which kind of tells you how old I am. But it's one of those things where our society has become much more victim oriented.
Absolutely. As for 8-track, mine was Kenny Rogers. Back in my youth, that was my only 8-track that I got. I was very excited about it. But no,
I had Alvin and the Chipmunks.
There we
Chipmunk.
go. Oh my goodness.
So it was country music as well, but it was Chipmunk urban cowboy. So
right. Well, and I do think that we as a society have kind of programmed ourselves, and then definitely our youth. The newest generation coming into the workforce and all of that are very misguided and have an incredible sense of entitlement because they definitely feel that they, shouldn't be held accountable, and they haven't been held accountable. And so, and I think as a nation, we haven't been held accountable. I think we're completely unaccountable, and I would dare to say that that's a lot of the frustration with Americans, in the rest of the world.
Yeah,
So.
and I think it's not a generational thing, because every couple of generations this happens. The Greeks were complaining about how unaccountable and how lazy and the younger generation was, and they were doing the same thing when the Pilgrims came. And it's one of those things where you can see it now more than ever because there's more media, and there's definitely more psychology in the air, so to speak. Not necessarily good psychology, but there's more psychology in the air. There's more self-help stuff. So there's more things that allow you to blame, and I call it blame. Accountability and blame are the same thing. It's just,
Yes.
Do I blame myself or am I accountable? It's the same thing, but people don't like to use negative words. Unlike myself, I have no problem with it. Negative words, if you give them power, then they will be more powerful. So I don't sit there and go, oh, don't use that. That's so negative. It's got a negative connotation. Yes, it's bad. It's supposed to have a negative connotation.
Right. And I think that using the more negative approach a lot of times, is what breaks you through to the positive. There's no doubt about that, and makes you accountable. You were speaking about victims and people using that or feeling, as if they're a victim. And I will tell you, not to get too deep into my past, but to kind of sum it up, I can usually one up anyone if I need to. Not that that's my goal, but when people want to start whining or complaining or using their past as a crutch, I can generally trump them. and of a bad experience. And I just have never been someone that wanted to use that as an excuse. And actually I've had people that will use it as an excuse for me. If something happens to me that, is difficult, or maybe I struggle with something, they're like, well, but you're lucky to have turned out the way that you are with, your upbringing, or you're this or whatever. And I kind of just look at them. I'm like, okay, thanks for, giving me that out, but I really don't need it. The bottom line is I'm an adult. I know right from wrong. I know what I should be doing. And so I think that that's it. And that's, I think the biggest thing is, whether you want to say right from wrong or accountability or blame, whatever it is, we all have that innate sense in us, regardless of your upbringing. Now, you might not be as, smooth or just not really know about social issues or things like that because of your upbringing or because of things that you haven't been exposed to. That's one thing.
Well, there's a difference between ignorance and stupidity.
Yes, of course.
So what you're referring to is more ignorance of situations that you haven't learned something or you don't know because you just haven't been exposed to it.
Right, because most people think ignorance is stupidity, and really ignorance is just a lack of knowledge.
Right.
You do not have that knowledge. And so you're exactly right, that it's just that you're ignorant to those issues. Or, there's certain people that have better manners than others. That's definitely taught, and that might be, or better grammar or what have you. But as far as who you are as a person and doing something right from wrong, because even if you grew up in or had bad experiences or, weren't taught certain things, while it was going on, you knew it was wrong. When the transgressions against you were going on, you knew that it was wrong. So to then grow up and go, well, I was abused or I was this or this happened, so now I'm going to do this to someone else. I'll give you a perfect example. My mother was a yeller. She would, just
my
constantly.
We call my dad Mr. Effing. I learned more swear words creatively from my father. I can swear in like 9 different languages and have euphemisms for everything.
Right.
And then they're shocked that we know how to swear.
Exactly.
So
yeah, well, for sure. And I think, but with the yelling, so that, and I'm kind of a loud talker anyway, but when I first had children, I found myself, I get frustrated. I was very young when I had children. So, definitely lack some certain skills, but I would yell and yell and yell. And as I was doing it, I knew it was wrong. I knew that I knew it was wrong when my mom did it to me, and I knew that it was wrong when I was doing it to my girls. And so, I just got to where I learned to stop. It just, as I got older, said that is not going to be who I am. And so I think that unfortunately, and that's just a tiny little, example, but I think it explains how people you can take one path or the other. And I could have easily done the normal thing, which is for people to just ignore it and then justify it that, well, that's how I was raised, or that's, what I know, or it's in my blood, or whatever.
And I think we've all been there where you sit there and you go, you did something stupid and you go, oh my God, I'm turning into my father.
Oh, yeah.
So it's definitely something that we can relate to. But when do you become aware of that? Because this is such a hard thing. When you get trained to lie to yourself, it's often becomes almost impossible to detect because you've trained yourself. It's become second nature. It's almost like it's sociopathic at some point. Is there a way we can kind of break the pattern? Is there something that was in that, whether it's an event or do you have to wait until you hit like someone's like quote unquote rock bottom before you can do this? Is there something that you can kind of look at to see, hey, wait a second, am I becoming this person who's lying to themselves consistently?
I think that you simply ask yourself one question, and that is, are you completely happy? Obviously, we maybe all would rather have a little more money, or we'd rather have this or whatever, but are you happy? In your life, are you happy? Are you in the job that you want to be in? Do you have the, relationship that you want to be in? All of those kind of things. And if the answer is no, if there's something that you feel like you should be doing that's different, whether you feel that your life is on, the wrong path, if you feel like that, which most of us know if it is or it isn't, that's the point in which you just decide, because people can go their entire lives never addressing this situation, but they probably are going to get to the end and have a lot of regret or wish that they had done something, taken a different path. And what this does, this is really just the first step. And, identifying that you lie to yourself is the first step. And then, like I said, the snowball or the chain of events that come after that, which is to, become accountable. And then after that, just like kind of the floodgates start opening up of you being aware of the things that you do that are holding you back. And if you suddenly aren't being held back by yourself, you're going to start moving forward at a rapid pace. And it's, people look outward all the time for happiness and wanting things and all of this. And it's the first step in many of basically becoming the person that you're meant to be.
Now, do you have a process to hold yourself accountable? Because it's kind of like dieting. It's like, oh, I want to do this. I'm going to do this. And then, a day, 2 days later, cheesecake comes by and you look at the cheesecake and go, oh, no, I'm dieting. And so that's day 2. Day 3, I'm going to try a little piece of cheesecake. So then you start slowly. That's why you need trainers. That's why a lot of people don't really, and they think it's a luxury, but you need to go out. If you're going to exercise and be consistent, you need somebody to kind of accountability to keep you going. Some people can do it on their own, but I think a lot of the times it's just too easy to get off the track by yourself.
Absolutely. And this is who people are, though. You know if you're someone that needs that help or not. I have clients that when I work with someone, basically I'm like, at the end of one session, you're going to have the tools you need. You're going to have all the answers that you need to go forward. And there are those that can do that. And then there are those that, are like, oh, no, you're going to be my mentor for the rest of my life kind of thing, because they need someone that can say every week, okay, what about this? And what about that? And just situations that happen and you ask them and you look at them and you kind of have the look, and whether that's a client or a friend, most people that's the role that I play is, even amongst my friends, they'll start complaining about a guy or, whatever. And I just kind of look at them and they're like, okay. Maybe I was at fault, or maybe I did play a role in that, or maybe, whatever. So I think that that's something that people have to figure out individually. Yourself. And if you, and it doesn't have to be someone that you hire. It can be,
Sure.
that you, like there's workout partners, as you're, to use that analogy again. I mean, you can find someone that you say, hey, listen, you know what? I'm going to start. I want to be me. How about you want to be you? Let's, start calling each other out. Because the truth is, especially amongst women, this is, I'm sure, not so much the case amongst men, but among women, we're always wanting to tell our girlfriends what we really think about the guy that they're with, about the choices that they're making, all of that. If you actually had a couple of women that said, hey, listen, I'm going to be honest with you, you be honest with me, it'd be like a dream come true with some friendships. But I think that if you do it in the right vein, then that is something that could be, very powerful. For sure.
No, men will go to their deathbeds not saying how they feel and to another man.
Absolutely.
It's getting better, but I mean, historically, and it's still the way. It's just not something we do. We don't share our feelings as often or as frequently as women do, or as readily. We just don't. It's just not something we even want to talk about, because oftentimes, I think, from a guy perspective, when you start bringing these issues up, then you start going, oh my God, how screwed up am I? When you can just ignore them and just continue on lying to yourself by saying, I'm not that screwed up.
Right.
I'm not nearly as troubled as I actually am, because if I start talking about it out loud, well, then that validates all the horrible things that are going on, or all the things I'm doing wrong. And that can cause quite an issue. So that's why men are just we just want to keep going, plug forward, and we'll get to the end of our lives, and then maybe there will be a deathbed confession. Maybe.
Yeah.
Only if we did something really horrible. Usually we don't really confess about little tiny things. Like, I stole a pen when I was in the 3rd grade. No, that's not going to happen. I killed a family of 9 and buried them in the desert. That may be a deathbed confession. But it's one of those things where men have a hard time. So since women have really a much easier time talking about this, how can you pull some of that out of men? Is there techniques that you can use as guys that can't be as easy as just go talk to each other, because that's not really going to happen.
Yeah, well, the good news is that I think men are just in general better at owning up to stuff. So that that helps them right out of the gate. That they don't. I think that for a man, the bigger struggle that they have is just, as we were talking about before, and just the society that we have created of, not blaming ourselves. And so I think just becoming aware, if you're a man, just becoming aware of the fact that maybe you're doing that, that maybe you're not owning up to, choices that you've made. Then once, I don't know, I just tend to see men being a little bit better at going, oh, okay, this was brought to my attention. I now recognize that in myself, and I'm going to change that, or at least be aware of it. And, because women are, let's just face it, are a lot better at making excuses for their behavior. Why they don't go to the gym. They're too busy. They're too this, they're too that, whatever. Men are a lot better. You don't really hear a guy going, oh, I just don't have time. They're like, I don't know, I was too damn lazy. I just, want to watch the game. I mean, they really are a little better at, saying, I was just lazy.
Yeah, that's true. We confess right away to stupid stuff.
Right. It's like a girl will be like, oh my gosh, someone must have slipped something in my drink. And the guy's like, I got wasted. So I think that the ongoing, accountability is a little harder for women, but it's still for both sexes is about recognizing that as, people, we just tend to, want to shift blame onto someone else. So.
Now, we can take some of that from the personal. We've got, we've talked about how it affects us personally, but in the business world and in when we deal with society in general, there's going to be a little more, I guess I want to say, protection from.
What was that?
I said in the outside world. Uh-huh. Well, see, we've been talking about relationships and our personal life, but when you take that out into the real world, we're going to be a lot more protective of ourselves because, we may lie about who we are to ourselves, which is going to come out to another person. We don't care. That person's a stranger. We're not going to see them again. We're going to protect them from all our flaws. Is there a way we can get past that irrational fear of other people judging us?
Well, I think, yeah, there is. And that is that whether we want to admit it or not, we want people to like us. So if you will start to recognize that people in general, if you try and act like you're perfect, their knee-jerk reaction is to prove that you're not. If you come in flawed and, you're doing your best, but you're like, oh gosh, this is it, this is me, whatever. Then people, they want to build you up. They want to be like, what are you talking about? And I'm not talking, this isn't about being confident or not being confident. You still in the business world need to be confident. And I one of my speeches is on that and, how to create a professional image and that type of thing. And that is definitely important. And so you want to put your best foot forward. But, I always use the example that, we've all heard every excuse in the book for being late or this or that. Nothing is refreshing to your boss as you coming in and saying, so I'm late because I hit the snooze too many times and then still stopped by Starbucks and I apologize. It's almost like, what do you say to that? It's exactly what happened. And to own up to it. Now, that doesn't mean you get to say that every single time that you do it, but, you just kind of are honest that that's what happened because I know people that are perpetually late. And they're always saying, oh, traffic was horrible, whatever. But I'm like, but what traffic is like right now. It wasn't traffic. You didn't leave in time, and I'm someone that's, I will start freaking out if I'm late. So I tend to, that's one that I'm always holding other people accountable on.
Yeah, my mother will call 5 minutes before the time to see if we're on their way. Because, she's so early that, if you're on time, you're late.
Right.
So, I can relate to that. But you've got a lot of, like I said, it's a lot of self-deception. And the title of your book, Life Lessons of a Liar, how to become the person you pretend to be. And how can we get to the point where we can be that person we've been pretending a lot? Because I think most of the time, most people pretend higher than they are. I don't ever think people pretend to be, they do, but not as often, pretend to be dumber, pretend to be or less successful. Or, there are moments and there are going to be instances where you do that because you just don't want to draw attention. but I don't think I think most people pretend that they're smarter, pretend that they're more successful, pretend that they're richer. So how can you, like the title of your book says, how can you become the person that you're pretending to be, so you can be that authentic person?
Well, I mean, obviously, the first step is being honest with yourself, like we've discussed. But, and this is what I was just trying to touch on, and I guess then I got a little off track. But, if people know that they're actually going to be seen as, perceived as better by being honest, then I think you'll see them, that's just kind of a natural thing in you where you're like, oh, wait, I can start letting my guard down. Because we do that, it's just like if you're in a relationship, initially, you're perfect every time you see each other, and you're thinking about every outfit and all of that. And then, by the time you get to a certain point, you're in your sweats and you're, whatever. And so we all get to that point where we're comfortable in certain, situations. And so I think just as a whole, to realize that, you're going to attract the best people for you, for your life, if you're as honest and, straightforward with who you really are. And, but to do that, you have to start doing it, inside first. You have to start admitting that, this is who you are. So if, let's say you're someone who's late, either fix it or admit it. All of these things kind of go along. I think any type of flaw that you have, and here's the thing, we all know what our flaws are. I mean, that's the first step, is just to start recognizing, that, make a list and say, these are the things that, I struggle with, that I know are me, and then start owning those. But I really believe and have seen that if people plant that seed inside themselves where they just say, I'm going to start blaming myself first for every single situation. And you'll, like you were saying, someone sitting at a red light and someone smashes in the back of them. If you're doing that in every situation, and that was you sitting in that car, you could sit there and go, oh, wait, okay, this wasn't my fault. And that's great. Okay, I can mark that one off the list. But probably 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be something that you did. You started that chain reaction. And so I was, go ahead. No, go.
No, you go right ahead. I was
just going to say that, how to become the person you pretend to be. You might not ever become that person. You might find that that's not the person you're meant to be. But it really, that subtitle is just to get people thinking about the fact that who we, put out there to the world and who we really are generally two different people. And once you decide to meld those two together and be one person that, inside and what you put out there, you're going to not only, it's going to make you a better person out there. It might make you a little less than what you've been saying you are, but it'll make you more real. And people definitely can sense, realness and honesty in people. That's just, that's a given. And then also it will absolutely make you a better person, in your home life. And then also just in you in general, in your own personal happiness.
Now, I know that this can be transferred to your children.
Yes.
So one of the, we've been talking about ourselves. So how can we, as parents, and I am not a parent, nor do I want to be, mostly because parents don't do this. So how can we get our kids to be more accountable? Because I find in society in general, we're becoming less accountable. How can we kind of we lead by example, but how can we also start to, shape the youth?
Well, that's very simple. We have to hold them accountable. And parents do not hold their children accountable. In general, this is a whole nother topic for me, but definitely I'll keep this one brief in that, just across the board, parents have stopped expecting the respect that they deserve. That's the bottom line. They have lowered the bar and said, you know what, I don't need to be, spoken to with respect. And you can talk back to me. You can talk down to me. You can yell at me. You can argue with me. I mean, all of these things completely unacceptable when I was raising my girls. There's no way. I mean, they'd get like the death stare and actually wouldn't even try it. And so I think that what I see with parents, and I deal with this all the time in this new generation of young adults, that they are completely unprepared and disappointed because there's not someone there to bail them out every single time that they screw up. And so they're confused. They really just are confused about how to cope. And I think that if parents number one, they have to start holding their child accountable for every single thing that they do wrong. You cannot just keep sweeping things under the rug. And the way that I explain this to parents is that if you were to realize that see every single time that your child is disappointed as an opportunity to build that foundation for them being a happy and well-adjusted and resourceful adult, then you would, then that's going to give you that kind of power, I guess is or just the willpower is probably the better way to put it, to see them suffer or see them be disappointed as a child. Because that's what it is. The parents they're not meaning to do something wrong or even be lazy. It's that they just don't want to disappoint their kid.
Yeah, I think they're overcompensating for the fact that in their generation, their parents, latchkey kids, let them. I walked home every day and I had one phone. It was like prison. I had one phone call just to let my mother know I was home, and then that time was mine. And so I think it's overcompensation for that. It's like, well, I'm going to be at every game. I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to like them. Because maybe my father was distant, which my dad was not, but he was a little too close. But he was like. Maybe my dad was distant, so I'm going to be their best friend instead of, being a parent. So it's like overcompensation to a large degree.
Absolutely. And you don't want to be the bad guy.
Right. They want to be a friend. They don't want to be a parent.
Right. And I think what happened was, I link this, I call it the Timeout Generation. As soon as we started giving timeouts and started that branch of parenting where we were going to be softer parents, this is the fallout of that. Unfortunately, it is true. I'm not saying that you need to spank your child or anything like that. What I'm saying is that there is always something that your child cares about that you can take away from them. But the problem is that, I remember, if I did something wrong, I would be grounded for, from everything, and it would be for an extended period of time. And I was raised mainly by my grandparents. They didn't care. They didn't care that I was upset. They didn't care. They just didn't care. It was like, too bad, you screwed up. That's your punishment. But I think, you've heard the phrase, it takes a village. Well, our village, the society that we're in today, has just, progressed or degressed is probably a better way to put it, into accepting, holding our children less accountable. And so then you find, the punishments are less and what have you. And the parents, they don't want to be inconvenienced. This is actually where the laziness comes in, is they don't want to be inconvenienced. Because I'll tell you, it's a lot. You're saying you're not a parent. It is a lot harder when your kids screw up than when they don't, on you. You have to be there. They're under your feet. They're whining. They're complaining. They're, whatever. And because they want their privileges back. And so the knee-jerk thing is to give in. And then when everybody around you, all the other parents are giving in, then it's easy for you to, kind of justify you giving in. And, that's where we're at today.
And of course, the best way is to lead by example, which is what you're basically, your entire book is about, coming to terms with yourself so you can be a better person. That better person will live the life that will allow your kids to see a better person and then become better people.
I will tell you that in the last 5 years is really when I had this shift of really trying to own up to everything. Obviously it's been over the last maybe 20 years of me, dealing with going from, kind of a troubled youth and having no boundaries or guidance by adults, and realizing, how to become a responsible adult that, I wanted to be and that I was proud to be. And I think that, I'll touch on something where you were talking about how do people get, where do you get to this place where, you take that first step or you do something, do you have to hit rock bottom? And I will tell you that I never thought that I was good enough. And I think a lot of people feel like that. They don't feel, they want to hide their past. They want to hide bad things. They want to hide, failures that they've had. And I got to where at one point, probably, I don't know, I remember being about mid-20s and I thought, am I ever going to feel like, I felt like two different people. I felt like a split personality in that there was this person that I really was, and then this person that I put out there to the world. And I really didn't feel like we were one person, and I felt completely lost. And I don't know, I remember when I was a child, I would look out the window of the car into other cars, and I wondered if they were just driving zombies or did they actually have lives like I did. That was something I remember being about 5 or 6 and thinking that. And that's how I felt when I was in my 20s, is I was thinking, will I ever feel like people know who I am? And that was the turning point for me to start just being open and honest with everybody about, probably 90% of who I am, my past, everything. And I will tell you, Craig, that the overwhelming response of people suddenly admiring me and looking at me and going, wow, you've been through that and you're this and you've done this and whatever. And, some people were like, that's BS. There's no way you've done all of that. That's not my job to make them. I was telling the truth that it's not my job for everyone to like me, and not everyone is going to like me. There's no way.
Yeah, I don't. I've gotten way past that.
Yeah, exactly.
I did stand up for a living.
Yeah.
If they don't like me, I don't care. I mean, I've disappointed my parents by becoming a stand up. You're nobody. So if you're disappointed in me,
right.
My parents still love me after the fact. So it's definitely one of those things where you start seeing other people's view of you, and as you get older, I think you just start realizing, I want them to think well of me, but if they don't, screw them,
right?
Because I'm doing what I can to be the best person I can be.
And I think that when I started admitting not only faults that I had, and then mistakes I'd made, and then also just things that we all kind of were raised, especially our generation, more and not putting it all out there, that you wanted to have that perfect home life or be perceived in that way, and divorce still was kind of ugly, all of those kind of things, and so I think I just didn't want people to know that about me. I wanted them to assume better things, and I found that people respected me far more for going through hardships. And that is definitely something as a parent that I've pointed out to my girls of, people, I always told them in high school, everybody wants to have the, awesome BMW and the this and the that. I said, but by the time you get to be in college, everybody respects the people that had to buy their own car or work for it or what have you. They start realizing, and it's all of those spoiled kids that, no one really wants to be around because they're like, what have you done? You can't relate to me.
They haven't earned anything.
Right, exactly. And people want to know that you've earned something. And I'm not saying to go out there and just, show all your flaws. You don't need to do that or expose yourself. You maybe just might not be who you are. But I think more just being able to own up to who you are as a person. And I realized that everything I had been through had made me who I was. And so why hide that? Why not give people, because I realized that if I chose the path of being honest, especially with myself, then that was going to only serve to help other people have the courage to do it themselves and not be victims and not be, whatever. So I think that was kind of the start of this. Now, the book itself really just kind of came about exactly 1 year ago. It was New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, something like that. It wasn't even a New Year's resolution thing. It just happened to fall on that day that I decided that I wanted to sit down and write pretty much what I wanted the world to know, what I wanted them to realize, kind of lessons I had learned by screwing up myself. That's really what the book is about. And I always say, if you read it, you will know exactly who KK Robbins is. I mean, it's pretty clear. And probably, every single lesson in there, I struggled with at one point or another. And so it's just, really showing you how the benefits of owning up to who you are, owning the truth.
And the world's full of flawed, messed up, failure, people who have failed, not failures, but people who have failed in their lives and have been able to overcome it. So the fact that you can expose yourself in that way just makes you more relatable in general, which is why people appreciate it more, because people do hide themselves so much. And so the book, Life Lessons of a Liar, How to Become the Person You Pretend to Be, you can find that on Amazon. You can go to your website, kkrobbins.com with 2 B's.
That is correct.
And of course, if they want to get in touch with you, you do speaking engagements, you do training, you do all kinds of great things. They can find you.
I do. Work with you in any way that I can. So absolutely.
Well, I certainly appreciate you taking time to be honest with me today. And
it was my pleasure.
Well, I certainly appreciate it. And this was a really good reality check because I think a lot of people really are dealing with this on a daily basis, whether it's a huge, massive lie, living a complete, strange, bizarre life that they shouldn't be leading, or it's just small little things that start to accumulate where you just feel uncomfortable about how you're living your life. I think it's very important that accountability, looking at yourself, becomes a more of a habit than the rare instance.
Absolutely. And I think that people will find that they're gonna find their happiness.
Once again, I want to thank KK for coming on the show. Lying can really get you in trouble, especially if you're doing it to yourself. So I appreciate her talking to us. And remember, you can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter. We even have a YouTube channel. So just look up Reality Check with Craig Price to find us. We'll see you next week. And please, stop lying. What's with all the lying? Don't lie. See you next week.